Welcome to Margins and Mandates, the show where plays, pivots, and pressure-tested leadership takes center stage. I'm your host, Jeff Lortz, former operator, advisor, and founder of the Agile Operator. In today's episode of Margins and Mandates, I sit down with Mike O'Malley, the CMO of Oligo Security. Mike's been in the trenches of some of the biggest transformations in SaaS and cybersecurity, from leading CyberArk's shift from perpetual licensing to subscription, to blitzscaling at no-name security, to now helping Oligo define a new category in runtime application security. We talk about what it really takes to move $1 billion business model in 6 quarters, the difference between building a new market versus entering an established one, and how to balance lightning-fast product development with disciplined go-to-market strategy. If you're a SaaS operator wrestling with growth, category creation, or customer-driven roadmaps, you'll get a ton out of this conversation. Let's get into it. Mike, thanks for joining me today.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
So I know we're cruising into the holiday weekend here. So you wrapping things up and getting ready for a nice long weekend.
I am. I have to go down to New York to drop my oldest off at NYU. Try to fit in a visit to the U.S. Open in Flushing Meadows. Couldn't really make it happen this time. Usually we can make it happen every year. It's a great event, and my spouse she's a huge tennis fanatic, and I'm happy to be along for the ride. I've been educated. I'm like the guy in Bachelor Party where Tom Hanks is playing tennis for the first time, and halfway through he grips it with both hands and just launches the ball over the net and over the fence. I'm pretty bad at it, but going to see the U.S. Open's amazing.
The Happy Gilmore of tennis, I guess.
Yeah, that's it exactly. Nobody's happy when after I hit it. That's the problem.
Yeah, so let's get into the business side. So I'd love to hear about CyberArk. It's quite a story as a company, right? And kind of where you sort of jumped into that story would be great.
Sure. So I actually didn't intend to go to CyberArk initially. I'd been in and out of different marketing roles. I like to say that I've worked for every kind of company in the planet and had every job in marketing in the planet, and had just sold a company that I had worked at, and I knew the CMO at CyberArk, somebody named Marianne Budnick, an old friend and a mentor, and she called and said, "Look, you're freshly out of this exit, and we're trying to do something pretty interesting here at CyberArk. We're changing from a specific privileged access management company, a one sort of category company, to a portfolio company. We're changing from on-prem to delivering things much more on a SaaS basis, and just as important, we're changing from perpetual licenses to subscription licenses. So it's a big shift that the company had in mind, and they needed help with sort of recreating or creating a new profile for the company, almost transforming it into this more modern SaaS type of company, and also transforming a bit of the look, the feel, the way that the message goes out to the messaging to broad audiences, and as well as how the company's represented in everything from advertising to PR and analysts. And so I was game for that ride. It was and joined, and was full well into that process when about, I don't know, 6 months later, my boss pulled me aside and said, "Look, I've got to leave the company because I'm going to go be CMO at CrowdStrike." And I think I was out of the room when they made the decision, but they said, "Hey, and we want you to take over and run marketing and try to get us through this transition." And so for the next 18 months, oversaw marketing at CyberArk as we went through a pretty significant transformation as a company into a very active brand, a known brand at that, and emerging. Did some worked with the then chief operating officer, a guy named now the CEO, and Matt Cohen, and he was just phenomenal person to work with. He just the ideas and the focus that he had, and the company really shifted in quite a short period of time. It was something to behold. We shifted from a on-prem or a perpetual license to subscription in less than 6 quarters, and it is nothing to wave your finger at, because that's a tough a tall order. And the same thing, we introduced new brand, new message, new portfolio, new way of talking about ourselves. So it was a lot of work, but it really came out really fantastic in the end. And the company, went from in the north of the few hundred millions now to well into the billions.
Yeah.
Well into a billion plus ARR this year. So really fantastic experience. And I left after that sort of mission had been completed. Was starting to think about what do I do, and I got a big sense of FOMO at the time, and wanted to sort of get back to the startup world, and so that's where I took the next step.
And were you there at CyberArk through the acquisition as well?
No, no, I was not. I left in 2022, so a couple of years ago, 2022, and joined a cybersecurity unicorn by the name of No Name Security. And No Name was a small, when I joined, maybe 200 people, but with $250 million worth of funding.
Mm,
And we really we scaled the company very quickly. It's was almost a textbook study in blitz scaling, and exited from there. We sold the company to Akamai in last year in 2024.
okay. And then kind of going back to the challenges at
Yeah,
CyberArk, right? So, that's a major, transition, right, from perpetual licenses on-prem to SaaS and a subscription model, and doing it in, you said, 6 quarters. Uh,
yeah, yeah.
at the end, you still must have had a pretty significant, perpetual on-prem, customer base, or did, you know,
You'd have definitely on. We did, just because it's subscription doesn't mean it's not on prem. And so, and a lot of the way that the places that the company plays are very sensitive environments, highly regulated environments that are on prem, and everything from governments to banks to other sensitive areas. So you have to have that on-prem product, but at the same time, you've got these same organizations and new organizations asking to have the same sort of product and the same kind of experience and the same level of security with something that's not necessarily on-prem, that's updated and offered via SaaS. And and there's also, speaking to that sort of one privileged access management space, the company expanded very rapidly into other identity and access management spaces. And somebody will probably kill me for saying, somebody's, saying I just identity and access management. What it's really called is identity security. And it's a more comprehensive way of looking at identities, which really are one of the key aspects of that attackers and others look for to exploit in gaining access to companies.
and in addition, right, you were sort of pivoting from a point solution to a platform, right,
Yeah,
in the middle
exactly.
of all that as well. Uh,
Yeah, it's identity security platform is how we positioned it.
and I'm assuming absorbing a couple of acquisitions
Yes.
along the way.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Exactly.
So
There's homegrowns, and there was a lot of homegrown stuff, but there was definitely there were definitely a few acquisitions that propelled it.
so in the transition to SaaS model from a licensing perspective, let's
Mhm.
start with there. What was the biggest roadblock or challenge, right, that you ran into?
you know Companies are sort of, it really is less of a technology or even a confidence thing. It's making sure the numbers work for companies, to have them understand that there's value being delivered on a subscription basis that is equal to, if not, and really it's of greater value than what they're getting out of a single purchase with a yearly commitment to do maintenance for a maintenance subscription, maintenance and support, and understanding that to teach buyers, especially procurement and companies that are used to buying one way and saying, no, we want to offer this to you the other way, and giving incentives both in terms of, here's how it's going to make financial sense, but here's how it's going to make you're going to actually be more secure on some levels. You're going to have a better product. You're going to have a better experience.
And were you incenting, migrations to the cloud as part of that as well?
I think on some levels, I won't claim to be the driver. I was an enabler of the process of doing it, and but there were, where we could get companies that had on-prem environments that were probably more suitable to the cloud. We'd push them or provide incentives to do so. I mean, being able to manage a cloud offering, especially as you start to platform, you want to add to a platform, be able to add new features, generate new revenue from those features. It's always better to have them on something that have a customer on a platform that you're controlling a little bit more tightly.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. So after you left CyberArk, you got into a super hyper growth, situation.
Yeah.
Where was the company when you first joined in terms of size?
We were pretty much, sub five, right around. I think we had just done like north of 5 million. So, and so still early years. It was,
Mhm.
we were a C round company that with A round maturity, right? So we were, and not in the sense that but we were growing so fast, we hadn't built all those systems in place that you see in companies the traditional sort of C round companies. We had, and so there was a lot of feeding the growth engine while at the same time building sort of best practices into it, and making sure that, okay, we're going to do it this time, but the next time we're going to do it, we're going to make sure that we're operationalizing all of this. And so it was a lessons learned on the fly kind of experience.
Interesting. And then, um, a company that's trying to establish a brand versus, your prior experience, which is kind of changing the image of the brand,
Yeah.
how did the strategy, the sort of the strategy change for you or the tactics change?
Oh, it was totally different because at CyberArk we had established categories, and at No Name Security, which is where I was at, it was a brand new category. It was API security. So API security wasn't something that people had really thought about,
Mhm.
and they understood that they had APIs, but not something that they were familiar with, or how to secure these secure APIs. People were typically thinking about sort of web applications and not necessarily this, we called it sort of this new network that was being
Yeah.
created. So we had to invest a lot in education and a lot in awareness. It was all about, putting both the concept and the brand out there. At one point, we decided, and there were other companies in the space, but we decided how much did we want to, it was a balance between how much did we want to be associated with as the creator or in the vanguard of this category versus how much do we want to be associated with as the dominant player in the category. And it
Yeah.
was a balance over time.
It just makes the lift a lot heavier when when the market has not been established, right?
Yeah, yeah,
You're
yeah.
trying to establish the market and the brand, together, and there's no leader that you're sort of drafting off of, right? In
Right,
that regard.
right. Yeah,
Um,
and you're establishing a new buying center. So it's not that there was some pull from customers, but not, we were out there evangelizing the story, telling customers why they needed this.
yeah, I mean, a lot of companies like that either fail, right, or spend a lot of money, trying to build that market, and
Yeah,
then someone just comes up behind them and says, "Well, thanks for inventing this market for us. We've got a product that's slightly better. We're just
exactly,
going to go and
exactly.
sort of nibble away
Yeah,
at your success."
yeah. And
And
we, we
start,
we had we had a little bit of that, but it was
yeah,
still very early days. It was. I wish I had a little bit more where I could have done that behind somebody, but that's the case.
yeah, interesting. And in the case of oligo, are you doing the same thing, or is that market established as well.
A little bit of the new category, new market. We're in what we call runtime security.
Yep.
Concepts have been around for a while, but it's still something that we're educating people around, and it's really because of the fact that we're dealing with enabling technology that allows you to do things you haven't really been able to do before. And so it is, again, a bit of a category build. One of the things is there's a known VC, a guy named Gilly Renan, who had started a VC firm called Cyberstarts, one of the early funders of Wiz and a few other well-known companies. And I asked him for sort of advice, and he said, unless you, just like you said, unless you have a ton of money, don't go think you can build a category without first building demand generation, or first figuring out who your customer is, and then making sure that you've got a pipeline before you go out and think you can change the world with a category build. And it was good advice. I mean, when I joined Oligo, we realized that we were going to have to evangelize and talk about this much larger concept than people had been looking at before. And we also said, let's find the ideal customer profile of folks we know who are going to be interested in this. Let's go right after those folks first and and really narrow down that kind of persona of the buying center, but also what kind of company would be really suitable for this, and build pipeline there. And at the same time, once we get that pipeline, we can start to turn around and evangelize a lot more.
Interesting. So was part of that just like understanding and refining the message based upon those early customers' success?
Totally.
So you know what to say when you're going to start spending money on messaging.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's been an optimization A/B/C/D test over the past year or so with message and what resonates. The other challenge is that for the first time in a while, I'm at a company where the product, the development and the progress of the product is in many cases ahead of where marketing is. I love being the dumbest guy in the room. It fortunately or unfortunately, I know, unfortunately for me, but unfortunately for some of my colleagues, I'm the dumbest guy in the room when it comes to this, a lot of this product. And every month, every week, they're coming up with a new set of use cases that we can address, or a new set of features, or a new part of the platform that opens up that aperture of where our total addressable market is.
Mm-hmm.
And so as a marketer, I'm consistently saying, okay, we've got this core message. Well, actually, we've got to add to it. And in some cases, it changes the way that we talk about ourselves completely. And it's happened a couple of times over the past year.
So that would be a challenge for a marketer for sure, right? If you're always having to pivot, right, to different ICPs and different messaging and different sort of product features.
Yeah.
So is there an argument to be made, or do you try to steer the executive team towards focus in some cases?
Oh, absolutely. And we still have a core. We know, since I've been at the company, we've always had a vision of where we know we want to go. It's just happening a lot faster than the horsepower of our development team and our strategy team is higher than I've seen in a long time. So we're realizing it a lot faster. So we're playing not catch up, but certainly trying to make sure that we're ahead of it. And the key is, okay, like you said, what's our North Star? What is the thing we're about that you can apply to a number of use cases? What is what are we about? What's our core innovation or core innovations? And then how do we speak to different audiences based on that and the use cases? And so that's really, maintaining that North Star. It can be hard because there's lots of distractions and there's lots of cool shiny objects that you're tempted to go pursue, and you have to look at it differently. Say, okay, instead of let's go after this market, how do we bring value? How do we as a core bring value to that market, and how do we make sure that we can if we play in that space, we can actually be somebody who is a dominant player, or somebody who is recognized as this isn't a hobby for us.
Yeah, yeah, I know. Defining that North Star is one thing, but then having the discipline to stick to it, and not pursuing those shiny objects, right, is sort of the second part of the challenge, right?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah,
and then you mentioned kind of starting with demand gen, getting your first customers, right, understanding your message based upon that engagement. Now
yeah.
you've got these sort of marquee customers that are probably trying to drive you in different directions as well. Like, so is that part of the mix?
That's always the challenge with that is always the challenge with startups is balancing the requests for enhancement or requests for features from a big customer that you want to make happy versus kind of sticking with where you think your roadmap should go. So if you can match them up, that's pretty good. So we have a big customer. We are a cloud solution, but we have a big customer who is asking us to provide an on-prem solution because they have certain requirements there. So, and we knew we wanted to get there at one point, and we said, okay, this is where our pipe, our roadmap and this customer align maybe a little bit earlier than what we want, and maybe a little bit more, a little bit more focused than we probably would have. But let's do this now and make sure that we're doing it right. But you've got to be able to pick and choose what those advancements or what the response to a lot of those are, because you can end up in a world of tech debt, and that's not what you want.
Yeah. Are you a kind of 100% multi-tenant SaaS, or do you have some other
We
stuff
have
there?
it's not it's actually a sensor, an agent that so we it's in somebody's environment, so they'll deploy our we've got an agent
Okay.
that with a brain that comes, the SaaS part is the brain, but the agents are specific to each customer and the deployment. So it's not necessarily it's a combination, I'd say.
Yeah, I got it. Okay. Interesting. And then as you're evolving, and how big is the company just in terms of employees now?
Right now we're almost 100 people.
Okay.
So
Um,
when I started out we were about 50 something. So we're growing, we've almost doubled.
and what does your team look like?
It's pretty the sort of the basic marketing team. I've got a growth marketer, well, first I've got a product marketer, I've got a growth marketer, which is digital and demand gen, field and regional, and with and becoming more partner,
Mhm.
and then a comms person. And the comms person is not just comms, but comms, content, customer, the sort of the anything that involves thought leadership. We've got a fantastic CTO office that a set of researchers. So the comms person, which is almost an insult to minimize it, but that person's responsible for making sure that some of the amazing research that our folks have done is out there and is really recognized. So it's
Okay.
everything.
So talk more about that, because you had mentioned, I think, that you leverage meetups and bringing thought
Yeah.
leaders together as part of your kind of network marketing plan. How do you do that?
So for us, in cybersecurity, having both a product but also the credibility of your team to say we can protect you, and actually let us show you different ways that we understand cybersecurity and the industry. And so most cybersecurity companies will have a set of researchers. Sometimes they're doing specific research that's the direction of the product or the focus of the company. Other times it's just pure, let's go find some stuff to hack and see what we can do. Our team does a little bit of both, and being able to show this research and say we're thinking about this and we're innovating here is critical, not necessarily for the end buyer, but certainly for influencers and users. And so we're thinking about the more technical folks and those who are going to look at a cybersecurity company with a jaundiced eye. They want us to have cred,
Mm,
and so leveraging it's really hacking research that this team does is a gold mine for any company that's in cybersecurity that can do it well. And this team, usually when you come out, the notion of what is called a CVE, a critical vulnerability enumeration, is what they are. These ideas of we found an unpatched vulnerability, or we found a new 0-day vulnerability in somebody else's software. Good research teams will come up with, a few a year, that where they get credit for the CVE. This research team has already racked up something like 20 this year, and so they're finding vulnerabilities and holes in software, everything from Apple's AirPlay to the basis for a lot of open source AI models. And
Mhm.
uh, and so sharing that and then talking about that and then relating it back to what we do, either at talks at like Black Hat or DEF CON, small talks at like networking events, or we have a Discord channel.
Mhm.
Those are
Mhm.
really critical to sort of getting a groundswell of interest.
Okay. So it's about establishing credibility, but
Yeah.
as a marketer who's just trying to put stuff in the pipe, um,
Yeah, I
is
mean, it's hard to, like, when you say, "Oh, this is cool research," and then you say, "Well, how's this translating into it?" You have to leverage that awareness into I call it the which is we found this incredible stuff, this really scary stuff, and we can solve it for you. We can solve the problem.
Mhm.
You got to have the and there, and and it's not enough just to put it out there. I totally agree.
And as you think about, your challenges, partially creating a market, um,
Yeah.
partially building credibility for the fact that you've got a solution that solves a problem that sometimes people don't realize that they have. And then, being small and unknown, right? From a brand perspective, like how do you balance those three things in terms of like how you build your budget?
Yeah, I mean, it's a challenge. I'll tell you that, because you've got a sales team that is asking for more marketing, more opportunities every day, and
Yeah.
then you've got this knowledge that at the very high end of the pipe, the awareness pipe, you're putting energy out there that is somehow going to come back to you, but you can't track it, and you can't, it's not going to directly result in an opportunity. And at the same time, you have to start to build credibility with partners and others to show that the solution itself, the product itself, is really something that meets a need. So the way I look at it is, I judge myself on and ask to be judged on opportunities, and meaning what are not just okay, what MQLs are we generating? Because you can, depending on how you measure them, they can be very meaningful or completely meaningless, right? And they're self-serving in many cases. Where the rubber hits the road is where a salesperson says, okay, this is an inbound opportunity. This is something marketing generated. It's something that's actually going to become a deal, and I think it's going to, I think we have a chance at closing it. We get measured after those first meetings, and then when those progress. And so the way that I think about spending money is how do I make sure that we get more of those. And you can do it by volume. You can throw a net out there like you're fishing, or you can throw you can throw some bait out there when you're on a hook and a rod. You really need to go spear fishing, right? You really need to figure out, all right, if I'm going to spend my money, where's the highest value I can deliver? Where the ICP targets that I'm going to be talking to, where the people that are clearly going to be comfortable with buying from a startup, where are those people who are actually forward looking enough to understand our message? And so you balance those and then start to choose those opportunities. A lot of the time it's defaulting to how you got to shake hands, get in front of people.
Mhm.
So these stages, it's getting salespeople or getting our founders in front of smaller audiences of people who are going to buy. But you also realize that there are media and analysts and other areas where your ICP or the type of people that you want to sell to, they are. So you spend money there, and you keep iterating,
Yeah.
and you keep iterating. You don't make. I like to make one big bet a year, or maybe two medium bets every half a year. But the rest of it is discipline of, okay, if we're going to do, let's just say, we're going to do an event, a networking event. How, is this an event where we know that people we want to sell to are going to be and are going to be
Mhm.
receptive, and
Mhm.
making sure you measure that and ask those questions.
Yeah. So pipeline metrics are the obvious thing, right? So
Yeah.
opportunities created, conversion rates, that's the
Yeah.
obvious
Yeah.
scorecard elements, right? But for a company
Yeah.
that's trying to establish brand, do you pay attention to things like share of voice and other kind of brand KPIs?
Yeah, we do. There's share of voice, power of voice, impressions, engagement is really where it counts. At least
Mm-hmm.
wherever we can track it, we do. So
Mm-hmm.
who's and it's with what's really complicating things is AI. AI is definitely making things harder to understand where we're popping up because even if you do a search bar, a search on Google, you're getting an AI summary that you really don't have much control over. Normally, you have control over SEO or where you can show up just by virtue of Google AdWord advertising. But with that AI bar, you've got to think completely different. And so the metrics are changing, and I think a lot of it is how you're showing up in different search engines, and we're just barely in the early tools of doing that. And so leaning on sort of, I wouldn't call them the old metrics, is good, but those kind of metrics of impressions, or really engagement, share of voice, it's directionally good, but you've got where you're showing up in important, I call them, in ecology, there's this concept of indicator species. The idea that when a certain species exists in an ecosystem, it means that that species is healthy. It supports that ecosystem. So if you're in the woods and you see a fox, that means that you're in an area that's got a healthy ecosystem because the underlying food web and an environment allows that fox to exist. So trust me, I always have a point. It takes me a while to get there, but I always have a point, which is you're going to look for those indicator species in marketing. And you say, okay, wow, we just ranked on tech meme, or we're showing up in certain feeds of well-known influencers, or we're finding placement in Wired magazine versus something that's just syndicating press releases. So those, some people would call them hero stats, but to a startup, those are clear indicators that you're doing something right. And it's not clear. They don't just happen after you do an announcement. It's that they start to register with people who are repeating or um,
Mm.
putting a spotlight on what you're doing.
Yeah. Or more organic indicators versus sort of hard
Exactly.
metrics. Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Exactly.
the AI thing, I feel for marketers because it's the role in the company that probably gets the most value from AI, but
Yeah.
also has to kind of sort out, how the company's tactics need to change based upon AI,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, yeah. What happens when one of your board members searches for you in ChatGPT for, okay, who's the best at this solution, or what's
Yeah.
the best upcoming startup here, and you either you don't show up, or they point to somebody who you either never heard of, or is your direct competitor. You don't have that much understanding the
Mhm.
levers behind that. We're still like first, second innings.
Yeah, I don't think anybody is that advanced at it. Frankly, and everybody that I
Yeah.
talk to is, trying to figure it out. Everyone
Yeah.
recognizes it's a problem, and it's a challenge that's not just evolving; it's like accelerating.
Yeah.
Um, so
Yeah.
people recognized it like 3 months ago, and all of a sudden it's a crisis, right?
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
the
It
marketing
is.
world, so it's really moving fast.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the traditional channels are just getting um, sort of flooded and kind of submerged under the weight of AI content, right? So so
Yeah.
now your content strategy has to really be changed and maybe changed significantly, right, in order
Yeah.
to be able to stand out in that.
I mean, does it point someday? Does it point to, or does this sort of point to, okay, almost like the Jerry Maguire concept of better content written by a human directly focused on generating value for the end user versus, an overworked marketer who's got to put out another blog and do that. I mean, we're all that. I am that overworked marketer, but do we go back to, or is it going to be more important to put out these sort of touchstone pieces that
Mm.
have a lot of care and crafting to them that an AI engine is going to recognize as sort of, the helpful, friendly content that it wants to promote.
Yeah, it's come full circle, right?
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
it's become volume because it's possible, right, to cost
yeah,
effectively produce volume, right, and
yeah.
just frequency. Back to true valuable content, right? That is hard to find valuable
Yeah,
content nowadays, right? But
right, right.
when you have it, right, how do you make sure that these LLMs are being trained on it, right? And
Yeah,
they all have different ways of training, right? So what works for Claude isn't going to maybe
it works
work for Gemini, right?
absolutely.
So it's a
Yeah,
real challenge.
it is. It is. Yeah, it's a new world in that
Yeah,
front.
for sure. Well, listen, Mike, it's been great, great chatting with you. Some great insights. You've been in some really interesting, situations, through over the past, 10 or 15 years that I think bring out some valuable lessons, right, for others that are in growth stage companies. So
Happy to
appreciate
help.
your time.
Happy to help, and love talking to you. Love talking about marketing.
All right. Thanks
All
again,
right,
Mike. All right.
take it easy. Thanks. Bye bye.